Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. This is Jonathan Coe, your host, and today I am really excited to be bringing a conversation with my collaborator, my dear friend, and my first astrology teacher, Britten LaRue. And many of you may have listened to a conversation I had with Britten a few months ago on this podcast, and in this conversation, we're also announcing that we have a new offering, which is a year-long program to learn astrology with us called Astrology as Praxis. And we are super excited about this. We have been dreaming up this container. We have been doing a lot of planning. We have been talking about curriculum and our philosophy to teaching. And it feels like a very exciting, sturdy container. And we just can't wait to start it, honestly. And it's going to be starting on September 10th. And I believe that registration are only open very briefly at the end of August. I believe August 26th to 28th. You can see all the details in the show notes as well as the course page, which is going to be linked in the show notes below. So let me preface this talk a little bit. So just to give you a little bit of a background, Britten and I have been collaborating, have been teaching together since last year, when Britten graciously offered me and asked me if I would like to be her teaching assistant at first for a couple of her courses. And then we decided that we wanted to continue going because it's just so fun when we're doing it together. And so I became a collaborator for Britten's Charting Your Course 7-month astrology learning container, which I believe started in September and ended in March started in September last year and ended March this year. And it was a beautiful experience, and we also learned a lot from that collaboration. You'll hear more about the details as well as us talking openly about the challenges that we had bringing that collaboration together. And what came forth from that collaboration was so profound that it really took us a while to figure out even what it is, to even name, using words, what it is that we were discovering together. And something that was always, I believe, at the heart of Britten's teaching was this idea that astrology is a living being. But it wasn't quite wrapped up or phrased in those exact words. And so our journey has been about coaxing this idea, playing with this idea, becoming conscious of this idea together through our collaboration. The implication of that really is that because astrology is a system that is used by humans that are alive, right? That have their own preferences, that have their own biases, their own judgments. Inherently, astrology is also continuing to evolve with us. And astrology is continuing to change us too, right? It's a two-way street. If astrology is a living being, not only are we impacting astrology as people who learn astrology, as people who love this language, as people who do hold space for others as perhaps consulting astrologers, but that also astrology changes us, right? And this kind of two-way street relationship that we have with astrology is something that I think we either don't talk about enough or it's not even something that we want to consider. So an example that I have, right, is if you have been around Instagram and you follow a lot of astrology content on Instagram, you will see that there can be an undertone of talking about different transits as almost kind of like blaming the planets, like, oh, I can't believe that this happened, or I fought with my partner because of this planet. And while that is absolutely a valid way of working with astrology and looking at astrology, I don't think that's the only way, right? And also, to me, it's almost like talking about astrology, talking about transit, as if astrology is not here with us in the room. It's like that difference of like talking with your coworker, right, about another coworker who is in the room versus the other coworker who is working from home, and there can be a sense when we're talking about astrology that I think takes away from the complication, right, of astrology as a living being. If astrology is a living being, how do we relate to astrology in a way that is respectful, in a way that is exciting, and in a way that nourishes the relationship, right? Rather than objectifying astrology. And I think this is something that we're really excited to explore within the container, but also if you just listen to this conversation, we definitely touched on this point quite a bit. And another implication to me of astrology as a living being is that all of us will come into astrology with our own unique flavors, right? Take me and Britten as an example. Our collaboration is really bound together by our love for astrology, and our devotion to becoming stewards of this system, this language, this way of looking at the world, this relationship with the planets, right? And also, without fully acknowledging that we are two different individuals who have lived through very different experiences, come from different lineages, have different temperaments, right? We cannot fully make space for the beautiful, glorious complexity that will come forth through learning astrology and through talking about astrology together. So that is something that is very much at the heart of Astrology as Praxis, this new learning journey that Britten and I are birthing into this world. And we're very excited for you to continue with us as we explore this idea of astrology as a living being, astrology as praxis. So I think that's it. And I'm just so excited for you to listen to this episode. And I would love to hear what you think. Here's my conversation with Britten LaRue.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Britten. So excited to sit with you and create this conversation.
I have been so excited all day. Well, so the way I understand the plan is we both have questions for one another, and we're going to take turns asking one another questions. And so you've asked me to begin, and I'm excited to do that because I like to go first. All right. So here's this question has some presuppositions or things we can accept to be true, but we can also disagree with these. So the first of these things that we can accept to be true is that many of us feel that astrology claims us. Like I feel that astrology claimed me. You hear people talk about being claimed by astrology. So feel free to feel into whether that even resonates for you. But if you accept it to be true that at some level astrology claimed you, And if we think about and accept to be true the idea that the conditions or the context of the beginning or the origins, the first start of something tells us something about the lifetime of the thing that got started, which is something that astrology does. If we go to the origins of you being claimed, we might say, by astrology, and wonder about how the conditions of that context can tell us something about your relationship to astrology across time, I was wondering if you would share about the personal and cosmic conditions, so to speak, of like your original being claimed by astrology, because I think that the nature of those conditions then can tell us and tell listeners about how you relate to astrology, how it's showing up across your life so far.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a beautiful question. Thank you for that. Yeah, I feel like astrology really came to me during a time of, in many ways and in retrospect, great need. I feel like I was really at a point where I started to lose myself, and in those moments of feeling like you've lost yourself or your identity, it can feel really scary and it can feel really destabilizing, but I think it's also always an invitation to another way of looking at the self, right? And often I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of really letting go of this idea that the self is an individual, and rather that the self is part of a greater collective body. That there is, each of us, right, are part of, we're all part of a symphony, and we play one instrument, and some of us may play that instrument really, really well, but still we are operating in the context of the greater music that moves all of us, right? So speaking of music, I really kind of came into astrology because I was trying to write my next album. That's what it was. I started reading Julia Cameron's book, and let me preface this before I even get to that story. I was called to astrology from, I would say, a very young age. I remember being a young child looking at my aunt's magazine when I was maybe about 5, maybe a lot younger than that, actually, maybe 3 or 4. And looking at those magazines and just looking at my sun sign, which was Pisces. And I remember vividly being very attracted to Virgo, actually. From the get-go. I didn't know anything about astrology. I didn't know that Virgo is the opposite of Pisces. I didn't know that I was a Virgo rising, but I just intuitively knew that looking at those horoscopes, I was really drawn to the Virgo one. And I had no idea why that would be. So I think I started there. And then also in my early 20s, another call to astrology kind of happened, right? Which was, I was in grad school, and I had friends around me who were really into pop astrology. And we were just always talking about dating through the lens of astrology, which was always fun. But I think during this period, I bought a lot of books. I studied a little bit by myself, but it wasn't something that I allowed myself to really pursue until I released my music. And then in some ways, it was a lifelong dream come true, but also a bit of a disillusion, because I think I was really getting very disappointed by how that creative project and its release was received in the greater world. So then I think that dissolution of my identity started to, there was this part of me that was done with one chapter of my life. And then I think begin to start asking what else is out there. What else am I interested in, and how can I honor these callings that are within me? So I started meditating, and then I read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, and then I found you, Britten, and I found that we have the same birthday, which was just so mind-blowing because my grandma also had the same birthday. And then later you became my first astrology teacher. And in the process of learning astrology, we both found out that Julia Cameron also shared the same birthday with us. So I would say the origin point, was, it's hard for me in my human mind to really think about what was the origin point. But if I have to narrow it down into one, I would say I was brought into astrology by synchronicity and by magic.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, that's been true of my journey in astrology, because again and again, working with this language, working with the system, with this way of looking at the world, has taught me the things that I am not. And it's just been a process of kind of delayering and letting go of identities that are not me.
Mm-hmm.
An example I would bring to the table is giving readings. I think every single reading is emergent, and every single reading is always a collaboration with the person in front of me, as well as their cosmic spirit guides, right? So I never know what's going to happen, and my cosmic spirit guides too. I never know what's going to happen, and even if I planned it out, it never turned out to be the way that I planned it. So for me, my journey with astrology, if I have to summarize it in one sentence, has been about learning what it means to resource oneself so that one can be in a state of wonder and live in that state of wonder and enchantment, because to me, that is the most delicious feeling. And yet, for many of us, our trauma, the ways that we have been conditioned by society, our inability to listen to our own intuitive, emergent selves have prevented us from truly accessing that state of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
And truly living in that place, because wonder is a bit destabilizing to the ego, to say the least. How about you, Britten? I'm curious to hear about how you came into astrology, and in what ways you feel that constant unfolding with this language, with this system, with this magical practice has informed you in terms of your path, and maybe even how you are living your life at the moment, or how you wish to live your life in the future. I know that's a very massive question.
Yeah, no, I love it. Bring the messy. Well, first of all, I wanted to share that this interesting thing happened as I was noting in my journal what you said. I had heard disillusion, like DIS, I think it's SOLUTION, like dissolve. And like this idea of like a self that is in a state of dissolving in some way. But then I realized as you said it again, and I thought, I think they said disillusion, actually, like DISILLUSION. And which is also just like so incredible in the sense of like realizing that maybe your identity or your path or what you think mattered to you was a kind of illusion in a way, as you were realizing that maybe that's not who I am and not what I want, and this is not my path. And like, I feel like both of those together are really fun to tease out in terms of, I think a lot of people do find themselves claimed by astrology in a time of both dissolving and the sense of disillusionment with what they thought they were supposed to be, or what they thought like happiness was, or how they are supposed to belong and feel safe in this world based on what they had learned from their conditioning.
Yeah.
And I see that again and again with those that I have attracted to astrology. And I think that for myself too, right? Like that was the same for me, because actually right before we hopped on, I found the email. It was October 11th, 2017 at 6:01 p.m. I have the email from my brother with the PDF of my chart and a note saying, you're going to be getting something letting you know that you've will have the next new moon cycle with the Chani Nicholas's like new moon in Libra or something like this cycle. Wow. So I was able to just look up like the actual chart of when I got my chart. And so, at that time, that was probably a week after my ex-husband and I told our daughters we were separating. And I started to have 50% of my time child-free. And I would spend that time away from my children in a tiny little duplex apartment that was barely furnished. It was like a little hermit space. And I had been teaching myself, based on those I was studying from, how to connect to the lunar cycle, and doing hours and hours of meditation, connecting intuitively to my guides, to past lives, to like really deep intuitive work to understand myself, to know myself, because everything that was my reality was actually literally dissolving. My marriage was, the contract was dissolving. My identity was dissolving. And I had learned these new mystical tools to access parts of myself just within the last 6 months, 7 months. And so I was at this moment of like complete openness cosmically. This was Neptune on my sun year, 2 years. And I looked it up, and actually Saturn was at the end of Sagittarius, trining my Saturn in Leo at the time of getting that chart, my birth chart. And I was just available to other ways of knowing myself, to like basically let the illusion of my ego's stabilizing needs just move on out the door. And very, very open to alternative ways of being, alternative ways of knowing, alternative ways of interacting, alternative ways of talking to myself, alternative ways of visioning possibilities, like so open. It was just kind of a miracle, right? Like synchronicity, that like this miraculous opening to envision. And in that space, when my chart arrives, I didn't even know a chart existed. And immediately was like, I know this, I remember it. I just need to find the teachers and just let it completely claim me. I'm just obsessed, as I've seen others be obsessed, like you just like cannot get enough. So I think that if we then look at that origin story as it's been playing out since, I just have really I've allowed myself to be claimed by the idea of emergence, as you know, really open to the idea of shedding and trusting what's coming in. And I feel that I've created a practice with astrology with other people where I feel that people feel safe in their own shedding processes with me and letting the chart help someone go through those processes, because it like is a mimic or like a mirror, a reflection, like a fractal similarity to my own meeting of astrology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious to explore this path a little bit, because what I'm hearing, Britten, is that you were maybe primarily interested in meeting your mystical self in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, astrology has also been taught, or the way that astrology is generally taught, is very analytical. Astrology itself is a system, right? It's a way to kind of put into a form that can be understood by our human minds, something that's so big that none of us can ever even tap into. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, what drew you to astrology in the midst of that intuitive exploration? And also maybe you can share a little bit about how you learn astrology. And and I know that, knowing your backstory, you've spent a lot of time learning in your life, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
would you say that learning astrology has been different or the same as the previous learnings that you've done in your life?
Wow, yes. I feel that it's the combination of the mystical and the heady, analytical, that was very attractive to me about astrology. I love the analytical brain. I love math. I like the geometry of astrology, like
Yeah.
I love seeing charts in my head and kind of doing the math, even from memory with myself and clients. And just, it's pleasurable to me, the headiness. And I think my long background in academia really helped me quickly navigate the field to find teachers that I felt had a kind of both a critical and a like ethical perspective, and even a political perspective that I could admire, taking what I liked and leaving the rest behind. But I feel like if it was just heady, it was not going to work for me at that moment in my life, and still to this day. I feel that as I started to receive from teachers like lists or descriptions of signs or planets, say, I just would start to feel them, and like then intuitively really let myself kind of plunge down into the waters with them and just like know them at these deep places and vibrate with the frequencies of what I was learning, and like have actual conversations with these frequencies, and just going to very mystical places very early on, trusting that my own gnosis with the language has as much value as anything that I could memorize. And that if the more I got tripped up on memorizing or like getting it right, so to speak, the more like it wasn't working, or like it wasn't really landing for me. I had to continually push through my own fears about letting it speak to me intuitively, while also kind of like keeping an eye on the integrity of that. Like it is an old system, so you can't just like make stuff up. But like there's this interesting line around that, that I found that it's intuitive to navigate. So I'm trying to feel back into the origins of your question. But yeah, I feel that as a practitioner, it's been a process to see other people doing their careers and kind of dabble with, oh, I could have a career like that person, or I could be like that kind of astrologer. And just slowly allowing myself to shed preconceptions around what astrology teacher, astrology podcast host, astrologer, all those things, like just letting things fall off that just aren't really what my gifts are. So I feel like astrology isn't even the main thing that I think that I'm doing, but it's like so deeply it's the language I'm speaking. So it's so present. Like the grammar is, you can't escape the grammar of a language, you know? Yeah. So it's like, I love the structure, and I love like moving off the structure and letting it talk to me in the ways it wants to. So for me, foremost is always, is it helpful? And like with each client or with each day of my life, however much I need to be deep into the rules, so to speak, of astrology, kind of shifts depending on what's helpful.
Yeah. So to me, what's very inspiring from what you are sharing is something that I feel like it really feeds into something that I've been thinking about with regards to any sort of mystical or magical practices, which is that the thing that attracts us to it are maybe the insights, the brilliant insights of the teacher, right? Or listening to a delineation about our birth chart that makes us feel so seen. But the longer that I've been in this path, the more I realize that the point is the process, not really the insights, because the insights come through at a time, and the insights are emergent, right? They come through at a time when we need the insights. And that's why the insights were so powerful, because it is rooted in time in a way. And outside of this rooting of the time and the context, the same insight may not have the same power. So it's really the process of us getting to that insight that is the point. The point is to, as you playfully, and I think perhaps maybe unconsciously shared in one of our eclipse webinars, the point is to walk with the planets. Because the walk itself is the point, and not really even the idea of what is like the correct astrology, or the right way to interpret this. But yeah, I love that. And I'm also thinking, I think something that you said about shedding layers of projection is so powerful for me to reflect on, because for a lot of us, I think the process of coming into our own authentic self really looks like that, right? We first put this model in front of us of what astrology looks like, or what astrology sounds like, or what an astrologer looks like. But then realizing that in the process of coming into terms with the fact that that's not what really resonates with us, we come into greater authenticity. We come into a sense of, oh, this is who I am actually, and really just living that, and also knowing that will change along the way.
Yes, and that our passions in the field in a given period of time will change. Like maybe you're just like obsessed with the lunar cycle for a while, like and then you just start to realize, like, I think what I'm really into is Saturn returns. like you just start to realize, and that you don't need to panic about or I've learned I don't need to panic about like declaring allegiance to certain parts of astrology and not others, and just trusting that to follow like the emergent passion that's here and ride with that, and it will take care of me, and bring to me those with who are also resonating with that I'm writing in that given window of my life.
Yeah.
And we'll play in it together. And that's what we'll do until we're not playing that anymore, and I'm doing another thing.
Exactly. And something I want to bring into the table here as someone who learned astrology from you, and you were my first astrology teacher. I think something that you really hold maybe as a tenet in your astrology practice, and feel free to correct me if or to add anything to what I'm saying, is that idea of really allowing yourself to not really to hold any allegiance to any particular astrological school or sect. And this is interesting because I've had my own journey with it too, in that my astrological learning process has been learning from many different teachers and many different astrological traditions, like really getting to know what evolutionary astrology is all about, what Hellenistic astrology is all about, what archetypal astrology is about. And I think ultimately or inevitably, when I'm learning from these different traditions, these different teachers, whichever one I am really deepening my relationship with at the moment, there can be like a Saturnian hardening around that, right? Like, because I'm in the process of learning, of questioning, of installing a particular software into my human brain, right? There can be a sense of like needing to defend particular schools of astrology. But where I've come to that feels really resonant to me right now is to really understand astrology, especially if we know the history of astrology in the West as having this broken lineage, right? Trusting that all of the different influences and all of the different schools have something to teach us and is actually an integral part of our history as astrologers in the air quotes West. Like really trusting that, that movement of evolutionary astrology, for example, came from a very specific time in our history that fulfills a need for that particular generation. And that there's still something we can learn about that, even if we are not, strictly speaking, an evolutionary astrologer. Or thinking about Hellenistic astrology. And Hellenistic astrology is an interesting one, right? Because there is still so much we don't know about the system. There are still so many texts that are not yet translated from that tradition. And how can we bring what we have known from the scholarship of really smart and dedicated scholars to see in what ways that study can be relevant to us in 2022.
Yeah, I love that. I think we've talked about this before, that for me, I really love the idea of, in one hand, holding this sense of like astrology is all astrologies. We all have access to astrology at any given moment. Like astrology is alive across all like time portals, and it's all part of this like larger being that is astrology that we all can be a part of.
Yes.
And on the other hand, like also recognizing the historicity of astrology, and that it's written by human beings from their particular moments in time. That contains their own biases and all the like human things about them. It's talking to other astrologers, past and present, from those time periods. And that like, it's also good to be very aware that astrology is part of its own history. It has its own specific histories. And as like good students, so to speak, as students of integrity, we also ask questions like, when was this written? What was the social context of this idea?
Yeah.
Who were they talking to? And does it resonate for me to just take all of this whole into myself and trust it, And so it's like, I think it's both and I think astrologers today, like, to me, it's just good practice to hold both very seriously,
Absolutely.
and lovingly.
Absolutely. And I think that piece about holding it lovingly is so it's so resonant and so important, because as any person who has spent a lot of time in educational institutions can attest, as both of us have, the way that we have adopted learning or approach learning as people in the 21st century in quote unquote the West, there's a lot of violence around it. There's a lot of violence in the ways that we've been forced to learn a certain way, or to believe that certain ways of knowing or certain ways of learning are less valid than another. And so I think that process of really feeling into how can I learn astrology in a loving way is so important and so shifting and so healing.
Yes. And thinking too about the harmful impacts of astrology on people and individuals, and the lasting pain of a reading. People can experience trauma from a difficult reading from someone, and
Absolutely.
so the words one speaks from this language, to me, it's like a high responsibility to be taken very, very seriously, in order to show up in ways that cause least harm and are full of love, and ultimately not about like being brilliant. It's about how can we participate in building a world that we want to see here, and how the language can help us with that work.
Absolutely. And that really brings me to my next question for you, which is around around what it means for you to build community around the process of learning astrology. And for listeners who don't know, I don't know, do you want to tell the story, Britten? How did you end up teaching astrology?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll get to where you're going.
Yeah. I think you're reading my mind right now.
I'm reading you. Right. So, I'm like I'm a Hierophant life card. And what that means to me is like, there's something about the digestion of knowledge that I can't help myself but just want to feel into how then to share what I learned from that knowledge in a way that might be helpful to someone. Whether that's like a friend to friend conversation over coffee, or like anything, it's like what I do is I look for like wisdom nuggets in like all situations and all forms of like learning anything.
Yeah. And sharing as part of that digestive process, right?
Yes. And it's like, ooh, I think I'm understanding how to talk about this. Does anyone want to hear how I'm finding how to talk about this? Like, would you like to come hang out with me and we can talk about like how this is firing my brain in these ways? So I came to a point then, and after being an astrologer one-on-one for a while, to the point of creating some online classes. The first one I did was a Pisces focused class as a Pisces, just wanting to basically create a love letter to Pisces and help those connect with the Pisces in themselves and help Pisces people love themselves for their Piscean qualities that are, deeply misunderstood in our culture. And I created a moon class to help teach about the moon and inner child healing and spiritual reparenting with the lunar cycle, and learn about how your moon sign can help you with parenting, self-parenting. And so then, having dabbled in some of those smaller containers, I felt called once we came into March 2020 lockdown to be of service in that time where people were inside, and just like, I know what we'll do. We'll learn astrology together. Anyone want to learn astrology? Anyone want to know about how I'm finding that how this will change your life and be amazing as your life is dissolving and you're in deep disillusionment, to come back to our early keywords. Yeah. And you were one of those people. And it was a beautiful experience together. And what I learned from a longer container is something that's now been on repeat in my longer containers, is, to my great surprise, astrology showed me that it's a language for constellating community. Like, I didn't create a course to create community. I created it to help individuals feel better about their own lives. And what I witnessed was people loving each other, and they're doing it through talking astrology. And it was like, what? Because I never thought of myself as a community constellator. I was always like a loner. I never wanted to do group stuff. I never wanted even a partner. It was like, I was just kind of like a Saturnian person in my study carrel doing everything myself. And
I was going to say, does Saturn rule your 11th house? Not surprising.
This Aquarius 11th house is where I have my part of fortune. For those of you who collect data on charts, I never known what to do about that, except there it is. Like, I feel that there's a frequency that I emit that allows people to find one another through me calling the meeting, basically. Yeah. And it's through, like, let's talk astrology together, that we all like fall in love with each other. That seems to be what happens. So that's been my great delight.
I can definitely attest to that. I've seen it happen in your containers so beautifully.
Yes. What was that your question?
Yeah. And I think my follow-up question to that would be, how has it been? Because I know you, in many ways, your astrology learning journey sounds like a solitary one. Sounds like very hermit card to me. And then it's almost like that, Britten's love for learning astrology and for applying this to her life begins to ripple outwards into one-on-one clients, and then deeper into various courses. And then with you so graciously inviting me to begin being your 13th reader at first for your other container, the Magician's Table, and then to be your TA for Soft Strength, which was the moon class you were talking about, and then to charting your course last year to be your collaborator. And I'm curious what this process has been like for you in expanding that, in a way, sphere of influence, but maybe also shrinking your sphere of control, right?
Oh. Woo.
I feel like this is what people never talk about, right? People are always like, I want to expand my sphere of influence. I'm always saying, do you know that also means, as a Virgo rising, this is one of my something that I think about all the time. It's like, when you increase your sphere of influence, you're going to be shrinking your sphere of control.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And like, if you had told me way at the beginning, like, this is how it's going to be, you're going to be you're going to really love collaborating and sharing control and co-creating. I'd be like, what? Never. That is not me at all. But just like that slow process of inviting you in and just feeling like everything's better when Jonathan's here. I love it. Really just like following what's more fun, to be honest. I think that's made it feel okay to let go of some creative control, and also like the kind of like who's holding the mic question, because for me, I always like, it feels like chaos when I don't understand who's in charge, And so the idea of co-creating has always felt scary, because it's like, how will this get done if we don't have a clear system for who's in charge here? I had never experienced a model of sharing that had felt like it had outcomes that I admired, or a process that I enjoyed. And so we're working with you was like a healing experience, because as I let go, I could see that it was okay, and actually even better, and release myself from the pressure of needing to be and do and know all things, which is something I've been healing from academia for quite some time too. That kind of model of teaching, moving into like a circular space of sharing and decentering. So that has been really beautiful. But as we realized, like there was something so powerful about last year, because we were able to witness the impact of our teamwork and the impact of our co-teaching for others, while also feeling somewhat, shall we say, disillusioned?
Yeah.
With like the old structure of the class that I had created solo,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think this goes back to you and I joke a lot about how we have really prominent Capricorn placements in our charts, and how even in my very first reading with you, we were talking about Capricorn, and I remember shedding tears when you shared that story about Capricorn being the mountain goat that rises to the top of the mountain and then realizes it's not their mountain to climb. And so climbing down another mountain and figuring out which mountain is mine to climb, right, is the Capricorn question. And to me, this idea of container and integrity of container, integrity of vision, as well as inclusivity of container really came up in our collaboration with charting your course, which was our 7-month astrology learning container. Because as you mentioned, it was clearly very impactful for those who participated. And we also started noticing data around the ways that maybe this container wasn't expansive enough to include all of Britten and Jonathan. And there were also maybe ways that container came out of a particular process and a particular time that no longer represent the two of us.
Yes. And there was a period of sort of like what I would call an emergent no. Like there was a pre-emergent no, the no that's emerging, where I think we both felt frustrated. And I feel like that's a symptom of an emergent no that's going to show up, is like, why am I so frustrated? Or like, there's frustrated energy. And then it was just so beautiful and powerful to share together our readiness to compost charting your course, and also with it, the emerging desire to create a new course being container together. Yes. notably, it was the day that Jupiter was on Pisces degree 13, which is the degree of our Pisces suns. So
Yes.
such a beautiful moment in our friendship and collaboration to just name, this isn't working the way we want it to, but that doesn't mean we don't want to work together. Actually, we are dying to keep working together. We
Exactly.
just want to like start again,
Yes.
and oh, that was such a freeing moment and so exciting because we knew
Yeah.
something was going to come in, but we didn't know quite what it would be yet.
Right. And I'm also feeling into, even though we haven't really started our container yet, how, what, in retrospect, looking back at that moment, what I realized was wanting to come through for me personally is a way to help people heal their, shall we say, teacher student dynamic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this, I'm really kind of speaking for myself here, having grown up in, Indonesia within the context of a very particular subset of Asian culture, there's a lot of reverence towards the guru, the teacher. Even the word guru itself, right, did not come from the West. Like the word
Mm-hmm.
guru came from India, right? And it speaks to this Eastern way of looking at our lineage, of looking at the teachers that came before us, that was full of beautiful reverence, but sometimes also it's, I think, important to name the mm, distortion of power that is inherent in this format of having the guru, the one who knows everything. And I think it's so fascinating, Britten, that you are like, as a teacher, you are the furthest thing from that. you know and
Oh.
and really, I think us working together, bringing this new container forward, having two people mentor those who are wanting to learn the language of astrology and want to deepen their practice, is to me like almost like a um, setting up the container to help heal some of these wounds for people who do struggle with that, of I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to the pattern of disempowerment, right? Because all of us, the truth is, on a soul level, all of us have a piece of the divine speaking through us, right? All of us have that cosmic wisdom. And the reality is also that we live in a culture that like let's just name it. We live in a culture that disencourages us or discourages us from claiming that for ourselves, right? That we do know deep down. Like I really am brought back to that moment where you speak about the moment of learning astrology and feeling like I already know this in my body, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what we are really hoping to share with others, and also having the perspectives of two different people who have different upbringings, different temperaments, same degree of the sun, but different rising signs, right?
Yes.
We are really kind of bringing into the table this idea that there are many different ways into astrology that are all valid and all beautiful, and how can we invite ourselves to heal the ways that we've been taught that particular way into astrology is not valid.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, I'm sure as we weave the lessons together, we will have disagreements, and we will lovingly approach those disagreements as the different ways that astrologers can think about this really beautiful system that is still evolving, that is still alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's an arc that I see and I welcome it. Is there's this sort of like I think to commit to an astrology container at the beginning, I think an essential agreement is a bit of audacity because you're really overcoming a lot, like there is a lot of just like, I just decided I'm not going to give a fuck anymore. And I'm just going to do this because you're potentially going up against what a lot of people in your family or community might deeply disagree with and find problems with. You're like calling yourself part of a lineage or claiming to want to participate in a lineage that in many ways is like preposterous, far off, woo, crazy to a lot of people. There is so much audacity to me in just like, yeah, I'm going to learn this. And like welcoming that, like right out of the gates, I just get so excited to see people showing up because the energy that's brought into a space with that like clicking of the button audacity is really powerful. And I just feel so swollen with like, just honor to witness people like so glowing and like, I can't believe I'm doing this kind of feels,
Yeah. Right.
But then there's like this process too of, there's some insecurity around like the complexity of the language, like that you holding space for the astrology student to be like mad at it, to be resentful at it, to be frustrated. Like, I'm never going to learn it. Like, it's not making sense to me. Like, I don't know what the answers are. There's a lot as a space holder to just let that just be there. Like, that's part of learning. It's like, it's not easy. Like if it was super easy and if it didn't take a lot of your time and energy and attention to learn, like everyone would just be doing this at this level. I mean, I want everyone to be, but takes time, And so I think as a space holder for it, it's a powerful thing to just kind of hold, and just let people have all of their feelings and like, let people even be mad at the teacher, cause like, why is this so hard? But then there starts to be these shifts, especially through like the conversational nature of storytelling with the lessons or with what we're learning. And people just start to feel this softening happening as people let go of these ideas of what learning looks like and what being good at this looks like and what excelling looks like. There starts to be this softening that takes over the space as facilities starting to come in, and like there's this sense of, I think I can talk about this now, or like it's resonating in my body, or like I had a dream about Mars last night, like these things start happening and you feel that softening. And then I feel like you can, even as people get deeper and deeper with it, I can feel as the space holder, the kind of experience you have when you realize your teacher has a way of doing something that maybe you disagree with, or like you just like don't agree with what they're saying. It doesn't resonate for you, and that's a really empowering feeling as a student. It's a big deal. And it's also part of space holding to me, is like just allowing people to be in the process of finding a way of talking about astrology that they prefer over the way you talk about it on certain topics, and that being okay too, because part of what we're doing in the space is helping people come into that empowered, embodied sense of confidence in the way they want to be relating to the language. And it's not about mimicking how I do it,
Yes, exactly. And when we think about the spirit of astrology, right? Maybe not astrology as a system that has its own logic and its own rules and its own mechanical ways of working, but really thinking about what is it in the human heart that draws one to astrology. I think a lot about this idea of our ancestors looking up at the sky and realizing that we are part of this larger symphony of the cosmos, right? And what does it mean for all of us to be part of the symphony, to go back to that metaphor again, and to each be playing the instrument that we've been given, to each be playing our part in making that beautiful symphony. To me, it's so important to both honor what we've been shared, what has been shared to us by our teachers and by various and teachers are really kind of a broad term here, right? Because so many of us now in the age of the internet learn astrology from people that we've never met or people who have passed on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and how we can honor that, how we can respect that, and also understand that for them, those insights came from their own particular way of being. It came from their
Yes.
perspective, and it came from their relationship with their birth chart too, if they're astrologers, right?
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
not our birth chart. And
Yes.
how I think there's so much skill is, and so much cultivation, a lot of patience and practice comes into this way of holding oneself in the journey of learning what it means for you specifically as the person that you are with your lineage, whether that's human ancestors or more than human ancestors, and your positionality in a particular society, how you're going to be relating to astrology, right? Because the answer to that question is going to be so different for all of us, and it will change over time too.
Yeah, it will. And it's just such a privilege to watch, to be a witness for those moving through all of that. Learning to feel the right to relate to astrology as per you is like a fractal for you learning to just be you all the damn time. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. And I think the beauty about astrology, because it is a symbolic language, is that it invites us into conversations, right? What it
Yes.
means for you, Britten, to be an Aries rising will be vastly different than what it means for another Aries rising to be an Aries rising. Because not only do you have different charts, even if there's another person who's born at the exact same time as you, right? And also born around you, so have the same exact chart as you, your lived experience will dictate how you interpret that symbolic message from the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be different.
Yes. And what I love again and again experiencing for myself and seeing it in others is how in many ways we come to astrology for ourselves, you know, with our own story, our own disillusion with our charts, our positionalities, our strivings, our longings. And then as we share our stories, as we're learning the language, we see each other so differently because we realize, oh, they have a chart too. Oh, what would that be like to have that placement? You know, what would it be like to experience Saturn and Aquarius in that house, moving through that house? You know, and then you start realizing that everything that's about me is also about all of these people, and everything that's happening to them like relates to me. And oh my God, we're all connected.
Yes.
I'm not alone. It just has this really beautiful rippling and flow back.
Exactly.
Loop.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that yes, there will be these differences and also these similarities, right? And like that's the beautiful paradox of being human.
Yes. And it's like the astrology itself invites you to wonder and ask the questions of what is that like for you, you know? And in that is like a very, very loving, beautiful question to ask another human being.
Yes.
Like, how does that feel? You know?
Yes. Yes. Well.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
If you feel complete on that.
I'm like, wow, that's a mic drop, but let's see. Where else can we go from there?
We might as well stop. Oh, just joking. Okay. So what I wanted to know from you is, since Jupiter was on our sun in late February, and since we've been dreaming this container together, like, what has been your favorite or your most meaningful or the most exciting aspects of the dreaming process?
Wow. So many. I feel like even just this pretty, I wouldn't say, yeah, it's a pretty short period of time that we've been kind of thinking about this container together, Britten, and dreaming and planning it. I think this period has just been so massive for me personally because, first of all, it really feels like a beautiful honoring of our dynamic together and really kind of healing through some relational dynamics that perhaps were subconscious to us, and maybe the ways in which we have unconsciously projected certain things to one another, and really being able to talk about that has just been really massive, and also seeing how that then translates into the curriculum. Because I think what I've seen from our process of working together is, as we work through some of these relational dynamics and move through patterns that maybe we weren't aware of before, that now we became aware of, and then we move past it, it became fertile ground for creativity. And it became so something I should say, kind of maybe as a contextual information, is that collaboration has also been very challenging for me in my life, especially prior to coming into my own mystical practices. As a musician, I found collaboration to be impossible. I still find it impossible. I don't know what it is. I think there's a lot there to unpack for me. And yet, when I started coming into my mystical self, into my astrologer self, I started realizing that I want nothing more than to continue to collaborate with people, because it's just that much more powerful. There's something that I really witnessed, even through the challenges that we were both experiencing through charting your course, that I would just be there in one of our weekly meetups and just be in awe of what you are able to bring into the container, Bryn. That I personally am not able to do, not because of any lack of skill, but just because that's not my personality. And that's not the human meat suit that I came into this world with, And so, like, really noticing the ways that collaboration can bring something out of us that we are not able to bring individually, and seeing how creating a collaborative container, and seeing how it can help me in my own personal journey too, has been massive. Like, for example, we were trading voice memos back and forth of you doing a tarot reading for our collaboration and for this container, and me doing an Akashic reading about it, has just felt so massive. It's like, I didn't even know we can do that as friends, Like, why aren't we doing this all the time, right? That we can apply our devotion to mystical practices to help us in creating something together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's
Yeah.
been really massive. And on a personal level too, once we have the curriculum kind of down on paper, I was realizing, oh wow, we have a lot to share. Like the two of us, between the two of us, like there's just so much that we can share. And there's a part of me that always, I think as a Virgo rising, I'm always a little bit worried about, do I have enough to give? Do I have enough to share with others? Can I call myself a facilitator or a teacher? And I think looking at that curriculum and feeling the juiciness of it, I mean, that question is just completely bypassed, you know? I'm not even thinking about those questions anymore because I'm already thinking about what practices, what insights, what knowledge, what frameworks I'm excited to be sharing. And I
Yes.
realized maybe that question about readiness, you are never ready. You know, you ready yourself through the process of saying yes to things,
Whoa.
which is something that your
Ready
Aries
yourself.
rising
Yeah.
is teaching me.
Wow. That's true. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I feel like there's been phases like there was the initial exhilaration of that's the problem. It's not that we don't want to work together it's anymore. It's just we want to create our own thing together as
Yes.
co-creators from the
Yes.
beginning.
Exactly.
But then like, yeah, as you know, I just admire you and love you so much that I just felt like I don't know why I need to be here. Like Jonathan has everything anyone would want as a leader. And like, I don't know why do I need to be part of this? You know, like, because to me, you're so brilliant and so loving. And yeah, I think we both just in each other's gaze, maybe like we're like in an illusion that the others was brighter or something like that. And had to like really get down inside of myself to be like, what am I bringing? Like, you can't just go through these motions, like being dragged along. Like you have to know what you're bringing. So it was like a healing experience to accept this choice to do this together.
Yeah.
Because I had to find within myself the self-love and trust that I'm part of this and it's necessary that I'm co-leading this. And I feel like our sort of mystical shares with one another really helped to turn that, like that was like a pivoting. And then we then got into the work of creating, and that was just so fun. Because we just have a lot of fun dreaming together, and we both are impressed regularly with
with what is coming through.
Ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I remember being so blown away when you, I don't want to give away too much, but when you begin reframing some of the modules as astrology as fill in the blank. Like astrology as a healing practice, astrology as an alchemical practice. And yeah, that to me was like, whoa, suddenly like the structure comes alive. And
I know.
And I think that's something that I've always admired about you too, Britten. I think you, and this is, I've been reflecting and contemplating about the trippiness of having a sun in seventh house chart that I have. That often what I find happens a lot is I notice people's brilliance and just the powerful contribution that they are here to share way before this person even recognizes it.
Yes.
So
I
like the
bet. I see it.
so the process for me has been about like really staying with it and being like, okay, Britten, like how is that possible? Like I am your biggest fan, you know? Like I am literally your biggest fan. Like how can you say that? And also having compassion. Like a part of me is like, what? But also the other part is really like, what does it mean to be a friend and to walk through this process together? Right? Because
Yes.
once we emerge out of that process, it's just pure play. So
Pure play.
thinking about what is required in a collaboration for the two parties or however many parties there are in that collaboration to get to that state of pure play.
Mm-hmm.
What healing is
Yeah.
required for people to get there?
What healing is required? Because, and I think part of the getting to a pivot was our like complete commitment to the energetics of the being of this container, basically, and like
Yes.
not wanting that kind of stale energetics of feeling insecure, feeling unsure with the other, to be present for both us and for the container's being and for those who are magnetized to that container. And just like whatever healing needs to happen, we're like, let's just bring it. And that was really beautiful. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Britten. This has been lovely. I guess as we wrap up, my last question for you is, I'm curious if there's anything that you feel excited in your heart to share about this container for folks listening who may be like, "Ooh, that sounds really exciting." Yeah, what feels good for you to share in this space?
Mm,
Or maybe let me rephrase that.
okay.
What are your hopes and dreams for the people who are attracted to this container?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like what I'm visualizing that came in is like what I'm hearing is like home building, this idea of like allowing the space of this container and the beings that it attracts and the language that we're falling in love with together, to help each individual both know a home inside of themselves in ways that they maybe hadn't before, for their own spirit, their freaky, different, gorgeously unique spirit, to feel more safe and shining, and also to come for the home of letting other people see that shine and have yourself reflected back to you by others, and then allowing other people to see themselves through you. And it's all like through the medium of this language. And whatever comes from it, like I'm excited to witness people like become professional astrologers through this experience. I'm excited to witness people move through whatever comes up that is appropriate, and loving, whether that's healing or some big shifts that they may realize they want to make, that are the space of this container can be part of an anchor for that. I'm excited to witness those who find like really, really, really great friends. And recognize that through the frequency of the container, people have found other people to laugh with that they didn't have before. Like at the most base level, just someone to like send a funny meme to that you didn't have before. Because we see this too, because our containers tend to have a lot of laughing.
Totally.
And even as we talk about serious things. So I'm really excited for both the ride of creating with you in service to this container. And I'm also just excited to be transformed by those who come into it and be their witness through whatever comes up. And it'll be different for every single person. There's no expectations about what a result looks like, you know?
Absolutely.
What about you?
I'm really excited for, I think I've shared this with you before, that I once was in the Akashic Records, and I saw this image of the two of us as the grandpa, grandma, grandparent energy, right? Very Jupiterian and kind of welcoming people into a heart-centered way of approaching this language and approaching, I think most importantly, their own process with this language, right? Because really, you cannot plan, despite your best human intention, I think it's very hard to plan what you want to be as an astrologer. And your journey with astrology is a co-creative journey. Like it's always going to be informed by so many different things, and yet you're also bringing a sincere desire to learn from all different angles. And I'm really excited to be constellating this community as you are, and also to I think explore different ways of facilitating, because part of something that feels very important in my own journey as a human being is about learning that being a teacher, a facilitator, doesn't look any one way. And bringing in kind of this mercurial intelligence of tapping into the moment and feeling into what is most needed at that moment and trusting the process. Because sometimes a facilitator can be, playing the role of a wise elder, right? Other times maybe a really, a space-holding mother or father or parent, right? Other times, a facilitator looks like a crazy cousin.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a cousin that comes in and just, shows you a way into something or a way of learning something that might just seem like a crazy scientist way of approaching something, And I think all of that, if we are to relate to one another as human beings, is so needed. And I think in the world of pedagogy or thinking about what it means to be teachers, we have put ourselves in boxes that are unnecessary and potentially even harmful. So I'm really excited for myself. This is selfishly speaking. I'm really excited in exploring all the different ways that the planets can teach me, Jonathan Coe, what it means to be a facilitator. And in that way, I am sure we joke a lot about this. In human design, we're both 3/5. And so I also have a lot of faith that my own personal journey is my offering to the world. That in allowing others to witness my process, they're also learning something about themselves and discovering things about their own path they probably would not otherwise have discovered.
Yes. Yes. Letting yourself be in process as a facilitator. Yeah, that's such a huge one.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be great.
I'm excited.
I'm excited. I get to hang out with you and everyone who comes on a weekly basis. We're going to get pretty tight.
Yeah, definitely. That's it for my conversation with Britten. Thank you for listening, and I hope that conversation was interesting, engaging, and I hope that you took away something from it that you didn't really consider before. Our hope through the process of talking more about this container that we're building together, other than, of course, to enchant you to come with us and to take this journey with us for the next year, is that we want to open up new conversations about how to relate to astrology, different ways of really working with astrology that perhaps can, invite in another way of being, a different way of relating to astrology that you perhaps haven't considered before. And if you are interested, we would love to invite you to check out our course page. You can check it out on the show notes. I'll have all the links below. Registration for Astrology as Praxis is open at the end of August, only for one weekend, which is August 26th to August 28th. And we will be starting our year-long journey on September 10th, 2022. And so stay tuned for that. And I would love to have you again for our other conversations. We'll hopefully have guests. We'll be exploring different topics, and I promise you it will be very juicy. Until next time, I hope you take good care of yourself, and I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for listening.